Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli back with another review video, and we come to our last Gore Verbinski film, part of Gore Verbinski Movie Week. And yes, as was clearly teased in the last review video, well, unfortunately, after Verbinski's last film, which turned out to be a huge disappointment, which of course being The Lone Ranger, his next project, 3 years after that, would be yet another disappointing failure. But I don't know. I mean, is this really that bad compared to, say, like, The Lone Ranger and such? I don't know, because for me, I didn't think it was that bad, and no way near as bad as, say, his last film, you know, and maybe the same, you guys would feel the same way too, you know? But, yes, guys, to round off Gore Verbinski Movie Week, and with what it is that I'm now about to review, yes, because, well, you read the title, and you know, and not to mention, this one film of Verbinski's is celebrating its anniversary. That's right, guys. I am now reviewing from 2016, A Cure for Wellness. Yes, Gore Verbinski's A Cure for Wellness. Well, yeah, I mean, the first things I have to say about it, well, like I said, is it really that bad compared to, say, you know, Verbinski's last film before this? I don't know. I'm just not feeling it, and that's just my opinion. You know, with what A Cure for Wellness is like, and with its storyline and such, you know, it's very interesting with its style and where this movie, you know, goes in its direction, and with the whole thing of a cure for wellness and such, and with it being set in Switzerland, and which, fun fact, with it being set in Switzerland, the majority of this film being set in Switzerland, they actually filmed it in Germany. Yeah. And with a great cast of talents that were in this film, and with Verbinski's direction, and not to mention that, you know, he was also a producer and one of the two main writers for this movie, so, yeah, that's pretty cool. And, you know, with it being a failure and such, and at the box office, I don't know, because I thought this was interesting, very enjoyable, and with the suspension, the horror to it, and how the horror is done in this, with what our main protagonist is going through while he's stuck in this facility, in this castle up a hill, and each of the characters that live in this place, and slowly but surely getting to each know of them, each one, and so on, and when slowly but surely, our main protagonist would discover the actual truth, and whom with the main antagonist is and all that. And, of course, with this being such a strange and sadistic and just twisted place, you know? And where the people reside and being treated and such, like, to be treated for wellness and to be taken care of and all that, but total opposite, just total opposite. Golly. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, just, I don't see anything that bad about this movie, because like I said, I quite enjoyed it. With its storyline, its main cast of characters, Verbinski's direction, the suspension, the horror to it, the twisted and surprising moments leading up to the end, the music and score by Benjamin Wallfisch, if I'm butchering his last name, but if, again, you know me sometimes. And which, fun fact, originally Hans Zimmer was supposed to do the music and score for A Cure for Wellness, but he got tied up with Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk. Yeah, that's understandable. So, yeah, enter Benjamin, and, you know, his music and score for A Cure for Wellness was pretty good, of course. Yeah. Yeah, overall, I like it for what it is. Sure, it may not be another great film of Verbinski's, especially since, yeah, this was his next project after the last one he did with Disney. Yeah, you know. Anyways, but yeah. A Cure for Wellness, a not bad horror flick of Verbinski's. Again, may not be the strongest, and also may not be the best horror flick he's done since The Ring, but still, the film is what it is, and it has its audience, and, you know, me being one of them, because I enjoyed it and all that with what I said. Okay, now, with my first thoughts and all that have been said and out of the way, now, as always, for me, read the description / the story. A Wall Street stockbroker travels to a remote location in the Swiss Alps to retrieve his company's CEO from an idyllic but mysterious wellness center. Yeah. He soon suspects that the Mercallius treatments, if I butchered that name some, but yeah, are not what they seem. His sanity is tested when he unravels the spa's terrifying secrets and finds himself diagnosed with the same curious illness that keeps all the guests their longing for a cure. Okay, now with reading the description / the story done and out of the way, now, as I sometimes do, talk a bit about background and such. Well, basically, the inspiration for all this, and the core story, you know, involving a mysterious alpine sanitarium and directly drawing from Thomas Maine's 1924 novel, The Magic Mountain, if anybody's familiar with Thomas Maine and that novel he wrote. And Verbinski and fellow scriptwriter of this film, Justin Haith, cited influences from silent era expressionist films. Yeah. The Universal classic monsters and films like Jacob's Ladder, Shutter Island, and even H.P. Lovecraft for the film's eerie atmosphere. Interesting. And the film would critique modern society's obsession with wellness, capitalizing alienation and the normalization for societal ills. Yeah. And with the spa's rituals, which those include eels, water, and isolation. And with symbolizing deeper spiritual malice and fermentual industries allure. Yeah, okay. But again, you know me sometimes with the mispronunciation. Okay, so, yeah, that's interesting, some of the background and such, and I'm sure as though that, you know, with what Verbinski and Justin had in store with this film, seems intriguing, but, yeah, it's just unfortunate that, you know, this film turned out to be another bad luck for Verbinski and such. Oh, well. Okay, now with talking about some background and such out of the way, let us now dive in / break down the film itself, shall we? Okay, well, the film opening with some, nighttime shots of New York and such, and hearing some very interesting, vocals from a woman, solo and such, and also because, yeah, this being a 20th Century Fox film, the way that the 20th Century Fox logo starts, not your normal 20th Century Fox logo with the fanfare and such, you know? It just comes in and just goes, fading and all that. Pretty interesting, and to go with the tone of this movie, of course, and I like that sometimes. But the opening to the film, well, we first come to a man named Morris, being played by Craig Rowe, yeah, I think I'm getting his last name right, and whom is working late in his office, and he would start to experience pain in his chest. And Morris would go to get some water, and when the pain would get worse, that's when he would suffer and have a heart attack, and he would collapse, knocking over the tube of water when he went to get water, and yeah, he would die. Man, what a way to start off this movie, and that's how much we get of Morris, you know? Not to mention that he did notice while looking at some papers, there was an invitation, and how it looks and such. Wonder what that's about. Well, after that, then we would meet our main protagonist, Mr. Lockhart, being played by Dane DeHaan. I think I'm getting his last name right. And whom I know best, and I'm sure the same goes for a good majority of you, Harry Osborn from The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and whom would become the Green Goblin. Yeah, him. But of course he's done a lot more than just that, but yeah, because I'm pretty sure that's where I was first introduced to him, and maybe the same goes for some of you, but yeah. But, yeah, when I was watching this movie, I was like, I know that face. And yep, it's Osborn himself from The Amazing Spider-Man 2, yeah. Well, not to mention other big films that he would go on to do later on, well, and because I mentioned Christopher Nolan, he would go on to be in Nolan's Oppenheimer. Yeah, that being a biggie for him. Good for him. But yeah, so Dan playing Mr. Lockhart, and whom is on a train headed to work, and he is very much into his work, kind of like a workaholic, I guess you could say, and, you know, seems a very rude person and all that, and being careless to others. Jeez. And Lockhart would go to a meeting with the higher-ups. We have Hank Green, played by David Bishens, yeah, Hollis, being played by Lisa Baines, and Wilson, being played by Carl Lumbly. You know, 3 other good talents in this movie. And they would review a note sent by the company's CEO, Mr. Roland Pembroke, and whom we will be seeing a little later in this movie in person. Yeah. Well, apparently, Mr. Pembroke was supposed to be away just for 2 weeks at a spa in the Swiss Alps, but he has not returned since, and after the 2 weeks were up and had come and passed. And, as a note indicates, with him not coming back and such, and he appears to have had some sort of breakdown, and thus Green would show Lockhart an illegal document he handed, and that is now under investigation by the SEC. Yeah. And Lockhart is now ordered to bring Mr. Pembroke back unless he wants to face the penalty for his action. Uh-oh. Yeah, surely he doesn't want that. And then we would, at times throughout this movie, we would get a couple of flashbacks. Well, we would have a flashback where Lockhart is visiting his elderly mother, being played by Rebecca Street, another good talent in this film, and whom she's, you know, staying at a retirement home, and she carries a small music box with a ballerina that she says is dreaming, and with the ballerina figure, her eyes are closed and looking like she's asleep, but not really, like dreaming while she's dancing and all that. Yeah. And only she doesn't know that she is in a dream, according to her some more. And Lockhart's mother, unfortunately, would die in another flashback a little later. Yeah, and sadly, she would be cremated before his departure. Yeah, and he would then keep the ballerina that once belonged to his mother. And it's obvious that she must have suspected something, because he does tell her that he'll be gone for a little while, and he'll be back soon. She must have had a good sense of feeling of what was to come for her son in Switzerland. Yeah. Okay, but upon arriving to Switzerland, Lockhart would take a ride from a taxi driver by the name of Enrico. Yeah, that's right, being played by Ivo Nadi. And we do get a pretty good majority of this guy. Does help out Lockhart a couple of times, but yeah. And while riding up to the hill, to the spa, well, at one point, and when they make their way to a village, this villager chucks a drink at the car, and according to Enrico, he would explain that the villagers have had a bad history with the people that live on the hill, in the castle and such, where Lockhart is making his way to, his destination, to hopefully get and retrieve Mr. Pembroke. And he would go on explaining to Lockhart that there is a story of a baron who wanted to protect his bloodline by marrying his sister. After learning she was infertile, if I said that right, the baron began performing experiments on the villagers, and which would lead to them revolting and burning the baron's sister alive. Yikes. That's a very interesting story, and with what Lockhart comments on after, he told that story to Lockhart. But yeah, overall, Lockhart, he would arrive at the spa. However, the visiting hours have ended, so unfortunately, Lockhart is unable to meet with Mr. Pembroke and such. And with what would happen next, and to speed things up some, because, yeah, he would have a little bit of interactions with a couple of the patients that reside in the spa. And the three patients being Frank Hill, being played by Thomas Nordstrom, Ron Nair, played by Ashok Mandana, if I said that right, and but again, you know me sometimes, and Victoria Watkins, being played by another good talent in this film, Celia Emery, yeah. And Watkins, in this case, she particularly enjoys crossword puzzles. Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't, whom is like hers, But, yeah, and then, Lockhart would have an interaction with, the deputy director, being played by Adrian, Schuyler, yeah. Talking about Mr. Pembroke, and, Lockhart, explaining that, he's come to, retrieve Pembroke and bring him back to New York City, but unfortunately, it doesn't go too well, and Lockhart doesn't exactly make progress with negotiating with the deputy director and all that. Oh well. And, ultimately, because, yeah, for now, Lockhart will stay in Switzerland, we'll book a hotel, and we'll come back a little later, according to what the deputy director specifically says on when it'll be the perfect time to, retrieve Pembroke and all that. Yeah. And, yeah, so he would once again, Lockhart would once again ride in the taxi and all that, although it's more of like a limo or something, I'm just saying, because it's a black car, and they would leave the place, and at one point, there's someone up top of the castle walls that's watching Lockhart as he leaves. We first see her, barefoot, and then we see her completely, this mysterious girl, and Lockhart even sees her there too, and Lockhart's taxi driver, noticing this and questioning Lockhart, pretty girl, because, he saw a pretty girl. However, at one point, they would accidentally hit a deer, because a deer runs out from the woods and into the road, and Enrico would hit the deer, and which gets stuck, and just, golly, like, the deer just frantically struggling and wailing, and it would cause the car to, swerve off the road and crash into a ditch. And that's where, yeah, another flashback hits where, yeah, because we see a little bit more of Lockhart's mother. She wakes up, and then she would die, and that's when we see that, she's being cremated and such. And then, what would happen next? Lockhart would, recover from that car accident. 3 days later, he would awaken 3 days later in a room at the spa, and he meets with the spa's director, Dr. Henrik Vollmer. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I got his first name right. Being played by another good talent in this film, good old Jason Isaacs, aka Lucius Malfoy, and amongst other great things he's been in. We all love Jason. And, yeah, and also, the first things I have to say about, from, say, Dane and Jason and all that, whom we've so far seen, yeah, because I will say it again when I bring up the rest of the cast members. I mean, in my opinion, everybody that was involved in A Cure for Wellness, they all did pretty good with the characters that they brought to this movie of Verbinski's. And in the case of Jason Isaacs, well, Jason Isaacs, come on. Surely, because we would enjoy him even if he's in a movie or anything like that that might not be that good. Just kind of, because it's just Jason Isaacs for us. Like, he's always enjoyable. We always feel welcome and just going to enjoy a great performance from good old Jason, right? Yeah. And yeah, because in the case of Lockhart himself, Dane DeHaan, yeah, because he was pretty good with what he brought to the character of Lockhart. And as Lockhart would develop throughout this film, and during his extended stay at the spa, and what he would discover, and how, yeah, he would start to change, he would develop and all that, oh yeah, that's really good. And yeah, just Dane, he did not disappoint. That's just my opinion. All right, but getting back on point, because yeah, by meeting the director himself, Dr. Vollmer, I'm just gonna stick with his last name. He would point out to Lockhart that he suffered a broken leg, and as a result of the accident now, because he's got like a cast and such to his leg, and Vollmer says that he notified Green about the accident. He called up those at New York, most prominently Green, that Lockhart was in a car accident, and he would also tell Lockhart to try out the spa's treatments during his stay. And he is put to stay in a room where he hears a toilet at one point, a toilet handle rattling by itself. But getting back to what Vollmer said, because, yeah, he contacted Green. Well, let's hope he did, because, I don't know. Maybe, hopefully, Green would understand Lockhart's situation with what's happened, right? Because I'm just saying, but, we'll find out a little later. But yeah, that whole thing where, as I now just brought up, the toilet handle rattling by itself, because it would happen a couple of more times in this movie. And Lockhart, checking it out at times when he hears it in his bathroom, in the room he's staying. And, and then at one point Lockhart would take a drink of water, and he would find a parasitic creature, floating in the glass. Yeah, like, that's not suspicious or anything like that. Of course it would, just, yeah. I mean, how would you react to something like that? But anyways, and yeah, as I mentioned already, Lockhart, having met the three patients in this film, and the more he would interact with them and such, especially Watkins, and and apparently all three of them, they all seem perfectly pleased with their treatments and all that. Well, that's good to see, and if it is really the case, and Lockhart, well, not only would he meet those three patients and a couple of other people that are working at the spa, but he would finally meet the girl he saw earlier before he got into that car accident. He would meet this girl whom, is singing that very interesting, vocal singing and all that. Yeah. Which, I mean, it's pretty well sung, even though it's supposed to be disturbing and such, And, yeah, this young woman whom is considered herself a special case, and she and several other patients, plus Vollmer and other staff members, are frequently seen taking a vitamin droplets from a blue bottle. Which, even the blue bottle being in most of the posters for the film itself. And the girl herself that Lockhart would meet is Hannah, being played by the one and only lovely, talented Mia Goth. And the fact that A Cure for Wellness is Mia Goth's first horror film, man, that's saying something. And look what would come to her next in the world of horror flicks, right? Need I say? Oh, and by the way, because another thing to mention about the three patients, one of them, and according to Frank Hill, says to Lockhart that Ron Nair, he comes from England. That's pretty cool, and, I just thought I'd mention it because it's true. Because when it's mentioned to Lockhart, and once proper introductions happen with Lockhart and the three patients, Frank, Ron, and Watkins. But, besides that, with what happens next, and actually this happens earlier, can't forget to mention this, of course, because when Lockhart would finally locate and meet with Mr. Pembroke. Well, at one point, Lockhart would leave his room, take some crutches, and even at one point he would come face-to-face with a nurse and lie to her that he's Mr. Pembroke. And with the mentioning about the bathhouse, and that's where Lockhart would make his way to. And at one point when he makes his way into the bathhouse, he would be in this one room where apparently everywhere he's looking, it's all brick walls, and, it's like an illusion or something, and he, feels like that the doorway he came through is gone. But luckily, in the bathhouse, like, the fog and all that, it clears off, and yeah, there's the doorway and such. Very interesting. And then, yeah, Lockhart would then spot Pembroke, and Lockhart would urge Pembroke to go home with him, and even like Pembroke, he would go in another part of the bathhouse to take a swim. And Pembroke, he appears to be completely fine and is not interested whatsoever in leaving the spa. Yeah, just, there's that. But, but Lockhart, with what he explained to Pembroke, and, this is important and serious, that they should depart and such, just doesn't go too well. Then, to speed things up some still, because, the more interactions that Lockhart would have with, Dr. Volmir, just basically, more about, say, Pembroke, and, even Lockhart doing a couple of mischievous things. Well, just, in a good way, where, privately he steals a file case on Pembroke and such. And, and what would happen next with Lockhart? He would undergo treatment inside a water tank, and the water would fill up, and the orderly tending to Lockhart would get distracted, and the tank would fill up with eels, and causing him to panic once he opens his eyes and he sees that there's eels inside of the tank. And Lockhart, he would rise and has his breathing tube pulled off by an eel accidentally, and he nearly drowns until, he gets the tank to open and spill the water out. And while this is going on, because, with, someone whom is right there, and if, Lockhart needs him, like, by tapping, and he'll help him with whatever, he gets distracted by this one nurse that comes in, takes off her top, and, she's topless, her boobs are exposed, and he's messing with himself. Do I even need to say? Yeah. But with this going on and Lockhart struggling, well, because we would at one point get another flashback. And basically, in this flashback, and we would see it a couple of more times throughout this movie, a young Lockhart in a car with his father, and apparently, according to Lockhart, he didn't really knew that much about his dad and, remember that much with what he specifically says. And his father, in the flashback, would drive over a bridge on a rainy day as he hears on the radio that stocks have plummeted and a bunch of jobs are gone. And he pulls over and walks over to the edge of the bridge, and Lockhart would watch as his father jumped after, leaving the boy in the car. Jeez, that's dark, and for his boy to see that. Yeah, and he was kind of holding up traffic, but they, managed to squeeze their way out of there with how he specifically parked the car. And fun fact, because the little, action figure that young Lockhart is playing is actually a action figure of RoboCop. I just thought I'd point that out because it's true. That's pretty cool. And, young Lockhart in the flashback. 9-year-old Lockhart, that's right, being played by Douglas Hamilton, and Lockhart's father being played by Bert Tjendorf, if I got his last name right or wrong, but again, you know me sometimes. But once Lockhart gets out of the tank and all that, he was rescued by those two, and yeah, one of them, again, being the nurse that distracted him, and Lockhart saying that, there is something, below the tank, and with them using a flashlight, there's nothing in the tank. The eels are not there. And the question is, for right now, was it a hallucination of Lockhart's? I mean, we, the audience, visually saw that, but we don't know specifically yet. And we're undetermined for now, if there were actually eels in there. Well, after that, and a bit more talk that Lockhart would have with Volmir, well, at one point, we would get another moment where, Lockhart has an interaction with Watkins, and Watkins would relay the Baron's story to him when he brings it up to her, and she would mention to Lockhart that the spa was built on the remains of his castle, the Baron's castle, after the villagers burned it down. And Watkins would then say that the baby was cut out of the Baron's sister, was still a fetus and such, from the sister's wombs, Baron's sister, and then the fetus was thrown into an aquifer, if I said that right, yeah. However, it survived. The child still managed to survive, yeah. And she would also mention that, she doesn't know. She doesn't know any specific details that, Lockhart would then ask her and such. Yeah. Then, another moment we would get between Lockhart and Hannah, because, not long after the interaction between Watkins and Lockhart, he would, meet with Hannah, and he would give Hannah his ballerina figurine in exchange for a bike ride into town, because she has a bike with her, and she's not really sure at first, but Lockhart manages to convince her, and the two would go together, and they would stop at a local tavern, and Lockhart would buy himself and Hannah 2 beers for each of them, and runs into Enrico. Enrico's doing fine and well, and when, Lockhart meets with him in the bar, and, with him having survived the crash, and he was given a new car with money that the spa gave him. Well, that was generous of the spa, right? And Hannah, she would remain at the bar while Lockhart would try to get some more evidence on the Baron and such. Unfortunately, not able to get that much out of Watkins, because she doesn't know. So he would try to find someone, and whom is at a barn, about, the more details about the Baron and so on. So he would have Hannah stay at the bar, and says that he won't be gone too long, but it kind of was, but still, just one of those things. And Hannah spending her time in the bar, and those that look at her at times and just kind of viewing her as a freak and such. And those that are at the bar, well, some of them, 2 of them being credited as bar girls. They were played by Natasha Lazus, if I said that right, and Lucy Schenderzel. But again, me sometimes. And a couple of others that were at the bar and such. They looked like punk kids and all that, And their names are Daneem, being played by Daniel Michael, and Frank, being played by Leonard Kunz. So, of course, didn't want to forget to mention them. And another bar girl that was there, being played by Sophie Charlotte Conrad. Okay, but with what Lockhart is now going to be doing, and as mentioned, going to a barn, well, he would come across a barn, and there would be two kids there. One a girl playing video games, and one boy whom is a mute child, and he is drawing the castle fire. And his father would approach Lockhart. He would step in, and the father being named Peter. There's an I in the name. Yeah, being played by Magnus Krepper. Lockhart would ask questions to the farmer regarding the spa and its history. Then the farmer would then go to a cow that is ailing and ready to die. And jeez, because yeah, he would cut the cow's stomach open, and out spills a stillborn calf and some eels. Oh, jeez. Man, yeah, like, that's a pretty sight, right? Yeah, sarcasm, of course. All right. Then Lockhart would rejoin Hannah at the bar. And yeah, the more time that Hannah was spending in the bar, she used the restroom at one point, and then she would come across, once she was finished in the bathroom, she noticed some lipstick that she would retrieve, and then, yeah, she would listen to music. Frank would give Hannah a quarter and such, and play some music, and that's when she would start to dance some. And when Lockhart came back in, well, he would ask the guy up at the front desk of the bar if he could use the phone, call up Green, let him know about the situation, update him and such. However, when he would get in contact with Green, apparently Lockhart would discover that Green was never called by the spa about Lockhart and that car accident he was in. Never. Huh. Very interesting. That's a very big suspicious thing. And when Lockhart realizes this, yeah. And by the way, because, like, also the bartender, well, yeah, that was Michael Mendel, if I got his last name right or wrong, but yeah. So, yeah, again, with what Lockhart has heard from Green, that Green was never informed and called up by Volmir and such, yeah. And, well, Green would order Lockhart to return to New York with Pembroke within the next 24 hours. But, yeah, there's no way that's going to happen even up to those next 24 hours. And Lockhart would try to confront Hannah by approaching her and asking her, like, what's happened to the others and Pembroke and such. Then Frank, who was dancing with Hannah a little bit, would intervene and just tell, Lockhart to F off and such. But yeah, Lockhart would then say to him back, F off, Adolf, and it would just get out of hand. There's a fight that almost happens, and even when Lockhart, he tried to use one of his crutches to strike at Frank, and then Frank's got Lockhart pinned to the ground, about to use a knife. Luckily, in the nick of time, Volmir steps in, breaks up the fight, and brings both Hannah and Lockhart back to the spa. And a little talk between Volmir and Hannah explaining to Lockhart that they didn't do anything wrong, they were just going out and such, having fun, and comparing Lockhart to the others, that he's different from the others, something special about him, according to Hannah. And that's a good thing, right? And Hannah, she would feel something in her stomach, and this would happen a few times, like, what's going on specifically? And just, yeah, even when Volmir tried to, wanting to help and check out what's wrong with her, no, she didn't want him to touch her or anything like that. And, well, Volmir, because, he would even explain this to Lockhart earlier, that, and yeah, because Volmir confirms to Lockhart that she is a very special patient and such. And even, like, yeah, Volmir doing his best to take care of her, and once she's officially 100% cured, she will be reunited with her dad. Her dad will return to retrieve her and to take her away from the spa. And even Volmir viewing Hannah as a daughter to him. Yeah. And yeah, so, Hannah being tucked into bed and such, and she whips out that lipstick she stole from the bar, she retrieved and such. I wouldn't say she stole it because it was just left there in the bathroom and such. That's true. Well, what would happen next for Lockhart? Well, once again, like, yeah, the bathroom, the toilet handle is once again moving around and such, and when he would, stop it, then Lockhart would feel something in his mouth. One of his teeth, a tooth of his, it comes loose, and I mean, yeah, there's no denying, even I can't deny how, disgusting and like, oh my gosh, like, how can you watch that? I mean, I did, but I was like, ugh, because still, it's painful to watch. Yeah, it would come loose, and he would then pull it out of him. He would pull it out himself, and he would then bring it to a staff member who places it in water. Although she said she was going to place it in milk. I don't know what specifically, but just, yeah. Oh, and also, right before that happened with the toilet handle moving and the tooth thing, well, Lockhart had another dream where he came face to face with Hannah, whom was in a bathtub with eels in the bathtub, and that being one of those images that's also in some of the promo and advertisements of this movie, in some of the posters. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen that image, and also having been in some of those trailers. Yeah, anyways. So, yeah, then Lockhart, he would go off to continue looking for answers. Yeah, just leaving his tooth behind. And he would sneak past the staff as he goes through several wings. And he would come across one room in particularly where several patients, including Pembroke, are kept inside water tanks and appearing dead. They seem like they're dead, and they're not moving and such, and with their eyes open. But even before that, because he would come across Watkins, and with the treatment she's going to receive, and, she's still awake and such, and this would be their last conversation, believe it or not. Little does Lockhart realize, and the more talk about, like, say, the Baron and all that, the sister, daughter, the child, just, yeah. And it would just get a bit intense, and even Lockhart would accidentally knock down a cart where, yeah, some bottles spill, and they crash, they break, and this would get the attention of some of the workers, and he would flee, make it out of there, and, yeah, and that's when he would come across that room where, yeah, a lot of bodies are in water tanks, including Pembroke. Then when he would make his way out of there, he would then come across Volmir once again, and with Lockhart mentioning about the tooth and such, well, still speed things up some, Volmir and others would attend to Lockhart and with his tooth and such, and while all of his teeth are okay, well, they drill into one of his teeth, and he loses another tooth! Jeez, like, insane. And, well, not long after that, and after undergoing that treatment and such, well, he would make his way out of the spa, where he would once again, meet with the taxi driver himself, which, again, that being Enrico. Yeah, because Enrico is dropping off someone whom is going to stay for a little while at the spa, a woman by the name of Mrs. Abramoff, if I got her name right, being played by Maggie Steed. Yeah, and right after dropping her off, well, Lockhart, he would, quickly make his way inside of the back of Enrico's car and telling him to step on it, and that's when he would make his way down in town to report Volmir's experiments to a police officer, explaining about what all's happened, and he discovered this one room below where bodies are in these water tanks and such. However, Volmir and his staff member arrive to bring Lockhart back. And Lockhart mentions the tanks and all that, and with seeing Pembroke, and, they say that Lockhart is going insane, mentally insane and all that, but that's not the case, of course, yeah. And with what Lockhart is slowly but surely uncovering, yep, the further evidence that he would discover, unveil, and with what we so far know, and with what's so far going on. and Pembroke himself would then emerge. He's right there, alive and well, and backing up Volmir's claims that Lockhart threatened Pembroke and saying he would bring him back to New York by force, if necessary. And Lockhart has no choice but to return with Volmir. And back at the spa, Lockhart back at the spa. Well, Lockhart would then start to act and think like Pembroke, in that he believes, he is not well and such, and must stay for a cure. And he has a moment of clarity while writing a note to his fellow employers where he thinks to himself, and as he quotes, that no man can unsee the truth. No man can unsee the truth. By saying those words, well, something strikes. And meanwhile, Hannah, as of right now, well, we would see her making her way using a pool, one of the pools in the spa, and using it, and she has her first period. That explains, and because what she was feeling in her stomach, her period happens, and the eels would emerge, start swimming near her. This is assuming that, yeah, they can smell the scent of blood. But while that's going on, because the more evidence that Lockhart would unveil and such, well, he at one point would, because, we would see this earlier and at times in this movie where one part outside of the back of the spa where, and we see some of the patients, like, they're having fun, like, flying a kite or, playing, racket and such, and playing ball. Well, there's one part where, yeah, it looks very suspicious, and there's a caretaker that sometimes comes in and out, especially during the evening time. Well, yeah, he would find his way to an underground area, and with, yeah, there being a pool, and he would find some notes and experiment stuff and all that, and, yeah, with what he's still uncovering and such, and with the pool down there, basically, this pool where dead bodies are dumped in and being fed to by the eels. Yeah, and one of those dead bodies just so happens to be Mrs. Watkins. Yeah, because unfortunately, Watkins met her demise, sadly, and Lockhart, he would hide from the caretaker and such, but he would be found by the caretaker, and the caretaker being played by Johannes Krisch, if I even got his full name right. And yeah, the caretaker would try to attack Lockhart, but in the end, Lockhart, of course, manages to take down the caretaker, like beating him by his bald head with a brick and all that. Yeah, and the caretaker, he's done for. Yeah, no way he's gonna recover from that severe head injury, thanks to Lockhart. Good on him. And, yeah, because with that going on, and at the same time, Hannah being in that pool with the eels, and with what was happening underground, something was, destroyed, and something it set off something, and in the room where Hannah's in, and, like, yeah, those eels scattering, not going after Hannah anymore. Then, what would Lockhart do next? Well, Lockhart would then break a glass and use a shard to cut open his cast, because, yeah, he did that earlier, and because he would discover, and again, he said those words, no man can unsee the truth, he discovered that, yeah, his leg was okay, and he cut off the cast by using that glass and such, because of this photo, this big photo with the bear in and all that, just, yeah. And, he would run out and such, and after all that, with what happened underground, he would find Hannah, she would panic, and she would hit Lockhart. She wants him to stay away from her and all that. and even when she's trying to help her, and with what he now so far knows and such, and she would run to find Volmir in a room that we had seen early, where, yeah, everybody is in a dining room and eating dinner and such. Yeah, the staff and some patients and all that. And Lockhart would also run in there too, and starts to tell everyone that Volmir is a liar, a big fat effing liar, and is the one responsible for everyone being sick due to whatever it is in the water. Yeah. The water that's being used at the spa, just, yeah, do not drink it. But they have been, just, yeah. And which is responsible for making their teeth fall out. And yeah, because in the case of Lockhart, he lost one tooth, but then he lost another tooth. They forcibly drilled it out. Just, jeez. And also mentioning that there is no cure. You know, it's bullcrap and such, with what Lockhart specifically states. And the patients, they start to stand, and Lockhart thinks that it's in support of him. And what, they're now gonna, obviously, you know, go after Volmir or something? Like, what are they gonna do? Well, what they actually do is going against him. And as they slowly approach him, not at Volmir or anything like that, they approach him and saying that they are unwell. Almost like zombie-ish like, you know, with how they're acting. And yep, they would all crowd around Lockhart until he passes out. I mean, I assume that, you know, they didn't, like, attack him or anything like that, just made him discomforting and all that. You get what I'm saying? And then, what would happen next after that? Well, Lockhart would wake up in a chamber, and he finds himself there, and where he is immobile. And Volmir forces a tube down his throat, and uses the eel-filled liquid to put into his body. Oh my gosh. Yeah, we can now see how twisted and psychotic Volmir is, and him being the main antagonist of this movie. He is, in fact, the devil in this movie, and in the spa, running the place and all that. Yeah. And yeah, because, like, yeah, with them going into his body, the eels, well, yeah, where the eels filter out the vitamins that Volmir has all his patients take. Ugh. Well, then, Lockhart would then have his teeth fixed, good as new, and appears to be changed, just like the rest of the patients. Now he's one of them. One of us, Umagamma, if you get that reference. And yeah, being stuck and in a delusion that he is unwell. Ugh. And Volmir, he would then throw a party that night with the patients and staff. But even before that, there was another moment between Hannah and Lockhart. And because, yeah, with the state that Lockhart is in, and after all that Lockhart did with Hannah, showing her and such, just, yeah, now it's like the opposite. It's and all that, because it's sad. But doesn't stop there, of course, because like I said, yeah, later on, Volmir would throw a party with the patients and the staff, and he even gives Hannah a new dress. You know, according to him, she's now become a woman and all that. And, yeah, and for this occasion, and in his room, and, you know, Lockhart, when we come back to him, he starts to come to his senses as he thinks about when Watkins told him about the Baron. Yeah, the more details and information, the last remaining stuff that he would learn from Watkins, as I said earlier, just, yeah. And, yeah, and that's when he would find a portrait taken that, you know, which he found and such, and after the fire, there's also a note saying that she doesn't know, and Lockhart breaks the portrait. Yeah, I mean, he broke something different. It wasn't the portrait, my bad. Yeah. And he would use the glass to magnify one subject in the picture, a man with bandages all over his face. And we did see that a bit earlier in the film, as I recall, that portrait, and as I was explaining. And what the portrait didn't show, not entirely, because with the rest of it being covered by the frame, it didn't show what the man was holding in his hands, like what was in his hands and such, because he noticed that off to the side with something like in the man's hands with the bandages. And what he was holding was the hand of a little girl, which being Hannah. So, right after that, well, what would happen next? Volmir would bring Hannah into a room by the transfusion wing. There, he has kept a portrait of his sister, and who was also Hannah's mother. Jeez. And Volmir, he would then tie Hannah to the bed and prepares to rape her. And yeah, this is where we see Mia Goth topless and such. Not the first time, but anyways. Well, what would happen is that, yeah, Lockhart, he would then make his way to the underground place, and where he finds both Volmir and tries to save Hannah, and Lockhart and Volmir, they would have, like, a fist fight and all that, and wherein Volmir, he would reveal his true self, pulls off the skin from his face, and actually, because when, yeah, he was tying up Hannah, like, she kind of hit him some, and on the top of his forehead, the skin, yeah, because that's where we first saw, like, okay, something's off with the top of his forehead. But that's when, yeah, he would show his true colors, show his true face by pulling off that skin, and a great scream delivery from Mia Goth, right? Because, oh, Mia Goth just being one of those actresses that delivers such a great gutting scream, especially when it comes to anything horror, right? You know. Just, we all love Mia Goth. She's so great. And she was, and to talk more about the cast in this movie, because, yeah, Mia Goth, in the case of Mia Goth, well, she too was fantastic. For this being her first horror flick, she was no disappointment. And say what you will, but I'm sure most of you would think so too. If you are on the same page as me, that for this being Mia Goth's first horror flick, she was excellent. And because look what would come to her next, and all that, and everybody else that was involved in this movie. Like I said, they were all fantastic. Because despite the film not turning out that great, it had bad luck, it's not the cast members' fault. They did their very best. They were all enjoyable, and Gore Verbinski, he tried his very best, and I'll bring that up again once I get to my final thoughts and such. But alright, but getting back on point. Like I said, Volmir would show his true colors, peel off the skin, revealing himself as the hideous, scarred Baron. Yes, because he is the Baron, it turns out. Yeah. And the vitamins, they've been keeping him and Hannah alive for well over a century. Wow. And Lockhart would then lead Volmir into a trap where he dropped a bunch of fuel, leading Lockhart to set a fire. Yeah, Volmir would catch the fire. He would be engulfed in it some, but he would manage to put out the fire himself. Then the fire would make its way into some vents and would make its way to where the party's happening, causing the curtains to be set to flames and all that. And, even like, when this happens and it spreads, everybody in the room, they panic and they flee the scene and all that, escaping from the fire. Lockhart just trying to take down Volmir and at the same time freeing Hannah. But still, Volmir, he's still unstoppable so far. So far is still unstoppable. And Volmir would then drag Lockhart after throwing him on some stairs. He would drag him to the near pool where the eels are and prepares to kill him. But Hannah, she managed to break free, tying the last, rope and such where she was tied to the bed, and she would confront her father by using a shovel, swings it right on his head, like cutting his head, and going through his head, I should say, and, well, that impact of the shovel, well, because it causes Volmir, aka the Baron, to fall backwards into the pool, and the eels feast on him. Well deserved. That's the end and demise of our main antagonist in this movie. A very enjoyable villain death, when you say so. Yeah. Because with this kind of villain Volmir is, and whom is the Baron, how psychotic and such, like I said, and I make it very clear that he is, in this movie, he is the devil. So, yeah. Then after that, and with the place still being set in flames, Lockhart and Hannah, they would escape, and just as the patients and the staff flee, as I mentioned, from the burning castle, and yeah, everybody outside, and a couple of them, they're trying to put out the fire, and a few of the patients, and a few that interacted with Lockhart before, just complimenting, like, how amazing this is and all that, with what they specifically say. And Hannah, she would whip out her bike, and both of them would take the bike and ride away from that hellhole, pretty much, And on the road, as they're escaping and they're about to make their way past the gates, and by the way, because I didn't talk about those gates, very interesting designed, like, the top of them having eels to them, very interesting and creepy, so yeah, right as they make their way to the gates, they are stopped. Well, technically no, because they collide. They on the bike, they collide with an incoming car, which in the car turns out to be Green, Hollis, and Wilson. Yep, they step out. They've arrived from New York to Switzerland, and yeah, ordering Lockhart to get into the car because, yep, the 24 hours are up. And when they ask about Pembroke, Lockhart says that he's gone. Yeah, because he's done for and such. And they tell him to get in again, but he just flat out refuses. He will no longer take any shits from his fellow employers. Yep. And Hollis asks Lockhart what's wrong with him, and in response, Lockhart says that he's feeling much better. Darn right so. Yep, by this point he is. And hey, he got the girl in the end, and now they both can live happily ever after. Let's hope so. And yep, they would ride off, and Green would shout out Lockhart's name in anger and such, but nope. Lockhart, he's just going off his merry little way, along with Hannah, and apparently the last shot we get is a sinister grin forming on Lockhart's face. I wonder what that's all about. Maybe something not good. We're left to wonder, right? Because that's what happens. We are left to wonder, and for us to figure that out ourselves. Yeah, and that's all she wrote. Jeez, I tell ya. Yeah, so A Cure for Wellness. Like I said, it may have turned out to be another disappointing failure for Gore Verbinski. Turned out to be bad luck and such, but again, come on. Is it really that bad in comparison to some of his other films that turned out to be not so lucky? Well, most prominently, The Lone Ranger. Just, yeah, that being a biggie for him. I mean, the other films that Verbinski did being some pretty good ones, but yeah, definitely when it came to The Lone Ranger and this, not the best ones. But again, is this that horrible compared to, say, The Lone Ranger? No. I don't really think so, in my opinion. Everything that A Cure for Wellness had to offer, and with what it was like, the whole thing of wellness and so on, with what Verbinski and Justin brought to this movie in the script and so on, Verbinski's direction, not all that bad. Not strong, just, it is okay for what it is. The storyline, great cast of talents from Dane DeHaan, Jason Isaacs, Mia Goth, Celia Emery, Harry Groner, Ivo Nadi, Adrian Schiller, and everybody else that was involved in this film. The music and score by Benjamin himself, the horror to it, the suspension, the setting and being in Switzerland, being filmed in Germany, but, the setting being Switzerland, pretty good. The look of the spa, the castle and all that, very interesting and creepy. All the various interiors and locations we see throughout the spa, and the evidence that Lockhart would slowly but surely unveil and learn, and whom the Baron is, Volmir, whom is the main antagonist, the devil in this movie, and all these gruesome moments that happen, just, like with the cow thing and the tooth and all that. Oh, and the toilet thing, because, yeah, eventually Lockhart would discover that, yeah, inside are some eels, but if it was real and all. Like, that was the question. Probably so, but just, yeah. And yeah, the whole thing with the use of, you know, the water and the eels and with the bodies and all that, just, oh my gosh, just very interesting. Very interesting for this one horror flick of Verbinski's. Yeah. Not to mention, because there's one thing in this movie that I did look in the fun facts and all that, where apparently, because there's a well that bears resemblance to the well in The Ring, if you know about that. Interesting, and a nice nod to that, you know, because a previous excellent horror flick of Verbinski's, definitely. And yeah, because it's obvious that, well, the best horror flick that Verbinski has done is The Ring, but no hard feelings on A Cure for Wellness. Just not as strong as The Ring, but like I said, it's okay for what it is. Just, yeah, overall, and to round off with my final thoughts and such, A Cure for Wellness, it is what it is. May not be the strongest and not the best horror flick that Verbinski's directed since The Ring, but it's not as bad as it seems, at least in my opinion. I enjoyed it for what it is. I think it's okay, and I'm sure you guys would feel the same way too. If you thought it was okay, etc. All of the above. Yeah. And yeah, just again, with a great cast, and like I said, most prominently, this being Mia Goth's first horror flick. Did not disappoint. She was excellent. I'll give her that, definitely. Okay, so with how many stars I give A Cure for Wellness? Well, I give it, why not? 7 out of 10 stars. Yes, 7 out of 10 stars for A Cure for Wellness. And what about you guys? What did you think of A Cure for Wellness itself? Did any of you get to see this in theaters? What was your first impression on it? And was this one of your first introductions to Mia Goth, I wonder? And the fact that when watching Mia Goth in her first horror flick, because couldn't have imagined at that time what would come for her next in the horror genre. Oh yeah, becoming one of the top best actresses to be in the horror genre, right? Yeah, you would think so. And if you were getting into the suspenseful stuff, if you got some jump scares and you were just like, oh gosh, and just like, holy cow, with the surprising reveals and twists and with what our main protagonist was unveiling, and if you enjoyed all the cast members that were a part of this film, and if you have some favorite moments, favorite lines and all that, just, yeah, and if you had a good time watching this movie overall, but just, yeah, and if this film would be one of your top favorite Gore Verbinski films. Just, yeah, but again, overall, what do you think of A Cure for Wellness itself with what all I've had to say, my review, and yeah, what did you think of my review? Leave comments and give this review video a like as always. And so, guys, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of Gore Verbinski's A Cure for Wellness. More review videos are coming your way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward, and I will see you guys in the next video / review. And, well, guys, Gore Verbinski Movie Week has come to a close. Yeah, this was a lot of fun, doing Gore Verbinski Movie Week, to review some of his movies that are not the best well-known films that he's directed and such, you know, being underrated and such. Yeah, especially, like, you know, the last two I reviewed, like, not being the best of his, but yeah. But like I said, you know, A Cure for Wellness, not as bad as The Lone Ranger, and if you feel the same way too, just come on, seriously, isn't that bad, just, you know. But yeah, again, this was a lot of fun doing Gore Verbinski Movie Week. I had a good time, and I hope the same goes for you. Yeah, if you enjoyed the Gore Verbinski films that I reviewed, part of Gore Verbinski Movie Week. Yeah. So yeah. With all that being said, yep, just again, thank you so much for watching. Take care. Happy anniversary to A Cure for Wellness. And until, good luck, have fun, don't die, peace out.